An arrogant police officer holding a cup of hot coffee deliberately threw it in the face of a black woman simply because she dared to demand fair treatment. What he didn't expect was that this woman was the newly appointed and highly authoritative police chief. Lily Moore walked into the police station with a confident yet understated demeanor. She wore a dark shirt and jeans, her long black hair neatly tied back. No one paid her much attention, dismissing her as just another civilian seeking help from the representatives of the law. "What do you need?" Jake Turner, a burly officer with cold eyes, spoke up as Lily approached the front desk. He didn't bother looking up from his computer screen, his tone arrogant and irritated. "I'm here to report a theft," Lily replied, her voice calm yet firm. Jake raised his head, narrowing his eyes as he looked her up and down. "Another one, huh?" He let out a mocking laugh, loud enough for others nearby to hear. "Let me guess, a phone or maybe a purse. Those things never turn up again, lady." Lily stared directly into Jake's eyes, unfazed. "I want to file a report." "That is my right." Her resolve seemed to test Jake's patience. He stood up, grabbed the coffee cup on his desk, and moved closer to her. A few other officers in the station glanced up, but none dared intervene. Some turned away, pretending to be busy, though their expressions betrayed unease. "Listen," Jake said, lowering his voice to a threatening tone. "People like you should know their place. We've got more important things to deal with than petty stuff, got it?" Before Lily could respond, Jake tilted his coffee cup and, with a quick motion, splashed the scalding liquid at her. The sound of coffee hitting her face and dripping onto her shirt cut through the silence. Lily flinched and stepped back, one cheek stinging from the heat, but her gaze remained steady. The atmosphere in the station grew oppressively tense. A young officer named Chris Meyer, standing nearby, clenched his fists as though about to speak up, but Jake's sharp glare stopped him in his tracks. Other officers simply looked down, avoiding involvement for fear of becoming targets themselves. "Consider that a lesson in respect," Jake said coldly. He returned to his desk, sat down, and resumed his work as if nothing had happened. "Now get lost." Lily wiped her face with her hand, feeling the eyes of everyone in the room on her. There was pity, there was helplessness, but no one took action. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. She wouldn't give Jake the satisfaction of seeing her falter, not yet. "Thank you for showing me exactly how things work around here," Lily said quietly but with a note of steely resolve. She turned and walked out, leaving an oppressive silence hanging in the air. Her footsteps echoed through the station, a sharp reminder of the confrontation that had just occurred. Lily walked briskly down the hallway of the police station, coffee dripping from her chin onto the tiled floor. The fluorescent lights reflected off her scalded skin, but she neither stopped nor looked back. Jake's words echoed in her mind, not for the insult, but for the smugness, the contempt of someone too accustomed to unchecked power. The door at the end of the hallway opened, and a middle-aged officer with a composed demeanor stood waiting. It was Deputy Chief Thomas Wright, one of the few people Lily had trusted with her true identity in advance. "Are you all right, Chief?" Thomas asked, his voice soft but filled with concern. "I'm fine," Lily replied, her tone colder than usual. "I assume you heard everything?" Thomas nodded, his gaze heavy with understanding. "I wanted to intervene, but you insisted we not reveal anything about you until you observe things for yourself." Lily loosened her hair tie, letting her long black hair fall over her shoulder, partially concealing her reddened cheek. "I needed to see it," she said, her voice calm but tinged with restrained anger. "I needed to see how this system truly operates when no one knows who I am." Back at his desk, Jake Turner leaned back in his worn swivel chair, oblivious to the grave mistake he had just made. For Jake, it was just another day at work, a place where he wielded absolute power over everyone. He had been at this station for over 15 years, not known for excellence but for leveraging connections and authority to climb the ranks. Jake had once harbored big dreams in his youth. He had been an idealistic officer who believed justice could change the world. But after witnessing his parents murdered in a robbery where the culprits were never caught, Jake began to see justice as an unattainable luxury. Bitterness and cynicism transformed him into a man who only believed in power, something he could control and use to protect himself. He had built a network of allies in the station, relying on fear and enforced loyalty. Jake knew how to exploit people's weaknesses, from young officers like Chris Meyer, too scared to defy him, to former supervisors willing to cover up his misconduct to avoid trouble. But what Jake didn't know was that his complacency had led him to make the greatest mistake of his career, crossing a woman far more powerful than him. Lily stood before the mirror in her office, washing the coffee off her face. The cold water soothed the burning pain but could not dispel her indignation. Taking a deep breath, she dried her face, her eyes regaining their characteristic sharp and unyielding look. "I want all officers gathered in the briefing room immediately," she told Thomas, who was standing silently by the door. Thomas simply nodded, refraining from asking any questions. Minutes later, the atmosphere in the briefing room was tense as officers filed in one by one. Jake entered last, still exuding his usual air of indifference. He took a seat near the corner of the room, crossing his arms with a smirk that seemed to challenge authority. When Lily entered, the room fell silent. No one recognized her immediately, but as she set a leather case on the table, straightened her posture, and looked directly at everyone in the room, a few officers began to sense something was different. "Good morning," Lily began, her voice firm and commanding. "I understand you've had an eventful start to your day. Let me introduce myself. I'm Lily Moore, and as of today, I am your new chief of police." A heavy silence enveloped the room. Jake, sitting at the far end of the table, froze. The smug grin vanished from his face, momentarily replaced by an expression of discomfort and disbelief. "No way," Jake muttered loud enough for Lily to hear. She turned to him, her gaze icy and authoritative. "Oh yes, Jake Turner, I'm very much looking forward to working with you." The other officers exchanged uneasy glances, none daring to speak. The tension in the room was palpable, like a ticking time bomb. "I've spent the past 2 weeks observing this station," Lily continued, her eyes scanning the room. "I've seen how you operate when you think no one is watching. And let me be blunt, there's a lot that needs to change." Jake swallowed hard, trying to regain his composure. But deep down, he knew the game had shifted. For the first time in years, he felt he might no longer be the one in control. The meeting room remained steeped in heavy silence as Lily Moore concluded her introduction. Despite the clarity and strength in her voice, no one spoke. The officers avoided her gaze, except for a few who stole furtive glances at Jake Turner. Jake sat motionless, his hands gripping the arms of his chair tightly. He tried to mask the anger boiling inside him with a calm facade, but his expression betrayed him. When the meeting ended, the officers quietly left the room, leaving Jake alone. Chris Meyer, a young officer who had recently joined the force, lingered at the doorway. He hesitated, his eyes darting toward Jake, a sense of injustice stirring within him, but he dared not say anything. Though inexperienced, Chris understood the extent of Jake's power within the station. "Ridiculous, isn't it?" Jake suddenly spoke, startling Chris. "Sorry, what?" Chris asked, trying to conceal his tension. Jake stood and approached Chris, his eyes sharp as knives. "Who does she think she is?" "Someone walking in from the outside, knowing nothing about how we operate here. She won't last long, trust me." Chris simply nodded and quickly walked away. He couldn't bear to face Jake for another second, but deep down, he felt a growing unease. The atmosphere in the station shifted immediately after the meeting. Whispers began to spread through the hallways. Some officers wondered who Lily was, how she had earned the position of police chief, and whether she was truly fit to lead them. Yet, for the most part, silence prevailed, a silence everyone recognized as fear and caution. Jake, on the other hand, maintained his usual smug demeanor. He was confident Lily wouldn't survive in this environment for long. Jake understood the power dynamics in the station better than anyone and knew how to manipulate them to maintain his position. On the other side of the station, Chris Meyer sat at his desk, torn between frustration and fear. He was well aware of Jake's influence and the lengths he could go to preserve his authority. But in his heart, Chris knew that staying silent only allowed things to worsen. This time, however, the situation was different. Jake recognized that Lily wasn't an easy adversary. She wasn't like the previous superiors who had been willing to compromise for the sake of keeping the peace. She presented a genuine threat to his methods and the network of power he had meticulously constructed over the years. Chris couldn't shake thoughts of Lily and the events in the meeting room. He sensed something different about her, a determination and decisiveness he hadn't seen in other leaders. Yet, he also felt the isolation she was facing. What do you think? Does she stand a chance? Jeff, a middle-aged officer with a tendency to avoid conflicts, asked Chris as they worked an afternoon shift together. Chris shrugged. I don't know, but she seems serious. Jeff chuckled derisively. Serious? That'll get you nowhere here. Being serious just makes you a target faster. Chris stayed silent, though he knew Jeff wasn't entirely wrong. He felt trapped between two forces, his dissatisfaction with Jake and his fear that speaking out would ruin his career. Lily Moore stood by the window of her new office, gazing out at the gray sky outside. Light rain fell, droplets tapping gently against the glass and forming small streams that seemed to paint a complex story. Inside, the dim glow of her desk lamp illuminated thick stacks of files. Yet her mind wasn't here, it had drifted to the past, a part of her memory that was both her greatest motivation and her heaviest burden. Lily had grown up in a poor neighborhood, where her grandmother, Evelyn Moore, was her greatest inspiration, a relentless social activist. Evelyn always said, justice isn't something handed to you. You have to fight for it, piece by piece. One memory etched deeply in Lily's mind was seeing Evelyn shoved to the ground by a police officer simply for demanding justice. Evelyn's teachings and actions made Lily realize that to create change, she had to step inside the system and work from within. Lily had devoted her life to fulfilling that promise. After graduating college with a degree in criminal law, she joined the police force, starting at the bottom. Her early days in the field were exhausting. Male colleagues often dismissed her, viewing her as a weak woman unfit for the job. But Lily was undeterred. She worked hard, learned diligently, and proved herself through her actions. One person who noticed Lily was a veteran officer, Raymond Harris. With over 3 decades of experience, Harris was respected for his intelligence and extensive knowledge. He became Lily's mentor, teaching her how to handle complex cases, withstand pressure, and, most importantly, hold on to her principles in a system riddled with compromise. Lily, this profession isn't perfect, Harris once told her. But if you keep a cool head and a warm heart, you'll make a difference. With Harris's guidance, Lily quickly rose through the ranks. She was assigned major cases and recognized as one of the most promising officers. But then everything changed when she uncovered a shocking secret. During an internal investigation, Lily stumbled across Harris's name in a series of documents linked to corruption. He had accepted bribes from an organized crime group to overlook critical evidence. Lily didn't want to believe it, but when she confronted Harris, he didn't deny it. You don't understand, Lily, Harris said, his voice heavy with the weight of years. This system will crush you if you don't learn to play by its rules. Harris's admission devastated Lily more than anything else ever had. She had viewed him as a second father, someone she trusted implicitly. But now, he was just another cog in the very system she was fighting to change. Instead of giving up, Lily took it as a painful reminder that she could never compromise, no matter the cost. Through years of challenges and triumphs, Lily became not just an exceptional officer but a respected leader. When she was promoted to police chief, she knew it was her chance to fulfill the promise she had made to herself and Evelyn. But she also knew the road ahead would be anything but smooth. People like Jake Turner represented everything Lily had to fight against. They weren't just individuals abusing their power, they were products of a system that had enabled and protected them for years. Jake Turner sat motionless in his small office, the fluorescent light casting a harsh glow on his face. Despite the weariness etched into his features, his ever-present arrogance remained. His hand gripped the edge of his desk tightly, his eyes fixed on the wall in front of him, where medals and certificates from years past hung. It seemed as though he was trying to extract some meaning from what was once called a career. Jake Turner had once been a passionate officer with the ideals of protecting justice. However, after the tragic death of his parents during a robbery in which the perpetrators were never caught, his faith in the justice system was shattered. Jake joined the police force not to uphold justice but to gain control and protect himself. Over time, he became bitter and cynical, using his power to dominate and manipulate. To Jake, justice no longer existed, only strength could ensure his survival. His moral decay turned him into a tyrant, fostering a culture of fear within the precinct, where younger officers like Chris Meyer felt powerless against him. As Jake climbed higher in the ranks, he no longer saw his job as a responsibility but as a tool to consolidate his power. The medals on his wall were largely the result of covering up misconduct or taking credit for the work of others. Jake believed he was doing what was necessary. In his mind, his rigidity and authoritarianism were the only ways to maintain order. However, his approach alienated morally upright colleagues and created an environment of fear within the station. Young officers like Chris Meyer looked at him with a mix of resentment and fear, but none dared to challenge him. In the early days of his abuse of power, Jake felt some pangs of guilt, but gradually, that feeling disappeared. He convinced himself that everything he did was for a greater purpose, maintaining order and protecting himself from any threats. Acts of violence and discriminatory behavior became, in his eyes, a necessary part of the job. Lily Moore's arrival reignited Jake's greatest fear, losing control. He didn't just see Lily as a new leader but as the embodiment of everything he despised: faith in justice and the system. To Jake, Lily wasn't a reformer, she was a threat, determined to destroy everything he had built. "If she wants a fight, I'll show her she's picked the wrong person," Jake muttered to himself, a cold smile spreading across his face. But deep down, Jake knew that Lily wasn't like the others he had dealt with before. She wasn't someone who could be easily manipulated or subdued, and that unsettled him more than anything. Jake Turner strode through the hallway of the police station, his smug smile firmly in place. After his recent conversation with a colleague, he felt secure, confident that nothing within this system could shake his hold on power. But at the end of the hall, his steps faltered as he noticed a group of officers quietly gathering outside the large conference room. Jake frowned. An unscheduled meeting. This was unusual. Suspecting it might be a power move by Lily Moore, Jake walked in slowly, choosing a seat at the far end of the table, subtly asserting that he wouldn't be forced into doing anything against his will. The atmosphere in the conference room was heavy, almost suffocating. Officers whispered among themselves, their eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. A few glanced at Jake, but none dared to speak up. Chris Meyer sat near the door, nervously flipping a pen back and forth in his hand, trying to mask his tension. He felt as though something monumental was about to happen, something that could change everything. The door to the conference room swung open, and Lily entered. She wore a pristine police uniform, her newly minted badge gleaming on her chest. Her presence silenced the room instantly. Standing tall, her gaze swept across everyone in the room. "Good morning," she began, her tone calm but imbued with undeniable authority. "I know you're wondering why we're here today. Let me make it clear." Lily stepped to the head of the table, placing her hands firmly on it as she looked directly at Jake. "My name is Lily Moore, and I am your new chief of police." The room froze for a few seconds. A couple of officers let out quiet, involuntary sounds of shock. Chris's eyes widened, fixed on Lily in disbelief. Jeff, the middle-aged officer sitting nearby, was motionless, but his expression brightened with a glimmer of hope mixed with astonishment. At the far end of the table, Jake Turner instinctively clenched his jaw, his eyes blazing with anger. He folded his arms across his chest, trying to appear composed, but the rigid tension in his posture gave him away. A wave of irritation surged within him. This was not what he had anticipated. A woman, nothing more, nothing less, had dared to walk in and threaten the foundation of everything he had built. Lily allowed the reactions to settle before continuing. "I'm not here to make friends with everyone," she said, her voice steady but sharp. "I'm here to ensure that this station operates as it should, protecting and serving the community, not protecting the personal power of any individual." Jake let out a derisive laugh, loud enough for Lily to hear. "Do you think you can change anything here?" he asked, his tone dripping with mockery. Lily turned her gaze to him, her eyes as sharp as a blade. "I don't think, Jake. I know." Taking a deep breath, Lily placed a thick folder on the table. "This is the first step in my reform plan," she announced, her eyes scanning the room. "This isn't a purge. It's an opportunity for everyone to start doing things the right way. She opened the folder, revealing a detailed list of changes she intended to implement: mandatory ethics training, a restructured process for handling citizen complaints, and the establishment of an independent internal oversight unit. "I will not tolerate abuse of power or any form of injustice in this station," Lily declared, her voice unwavering. "If you have something to hide, you'd better come forward now. If you don't, I will find it." Her words were not a threat, they were a promise. Everyone in the room could feel it. Some officers lowered their heads, visibly uneasy. Others, like Chris, felt a flicker of hope, a hope that this station could finally become a better place to work. Jake leaned back in his chair, narrowing his eyes. He studied Lily as though sizing up an adversary. Her words only fueled his hatred. He didn't see her initiative as an opportunity but as the greatest threat he had ever faced to his power. He stood, casting a challenging glance at Lily. "You can say whatever you want," Jake said, his tone calm but brimming with defiance. "But in the end, you'll see this system isn't as easy to change as you think." Lily's gaze didn't waver. "Then I guess we'll see who's right, Jake." Jake walked out of the conference room, not in defeat but with something darker brewing in his mind. A new plan was taking shape, a plan to bring Lily Moore down before she had the chance to deliver on her promises. Jake Turner slammed the door to his office behind him, the echo startling a few colleagues nearby who turned to look but said nothing. The atmosphere in the station felt like an overstrung wire, ready to snap at any moment. Jake, his face dark with anger, slumped into his chair, his bloodshot eyes fixed on the medals hanging on the wall. He felt as though everything he had built in his career was being threatened by Lily Moore. She doesn't just want to change the system, Jake thought. She wants to destroy it. Jake knew Lily wouldn't be easily taken down, but he also recognized her vulnerability, her newness. A new leader with little time to establish trust was an easy target for disgruntled individuals. That evening, Jake convened a small group of officers he believed were loyal to him. They were people who had worked under him for years, some coerced into allegiance, others willingly siding with him out of fear of losing the privileges he had helped them maintain. "Listen," Jake said, his voice low and authoritative. "She's not here to help this station. She's here to turn all of us into pawns for her so-called reform agenda. Tell me, who here hasn't made mistakes? If she starts digging, none of us will walk away unscathed." Jeff, a reserved senior officer, hesitated before speaking. "But Jake," he said, "this is an opportunity for everyone to start fresh." "She's not targeting anyone." Jake narrowed his eyes at Jeff, his tone dropping to a menacing whisper. "Do you believe that? Believe she'll leave us alone? Trust me, when she needs a scapegoat to make an example, it'll be us. Every single one of us in this room." Jake's words sowed seeds of vague fear among the officers. They didn't entirely trust him, but they lacked the courage to defy him. Their silent acquiescence was all Jake needed. The next morning, Jake began executing his plan. He seized every opportunity to undermine Lily, emphasizing in conversations with colleagues her lack of understanding about how the system worked and accusing her of trying to tear it down instead of building it back up. "She doesn't know anything about how we operate here," Jake said to a group of officers during a break. "She thinks a few reform plans will change anything? It's naive." But Jake didn't stop at internal manipulation. He reached out to Mark Calloway, a high-ranking official seeking support. "If she brings me down, the whole system we've built will collapse," Jake argued. Calloway agreed to assist but warned, "You're just a pawn. Don't disappoint me." Jake nodded, keeping his emotions in check. He knew he was entering a dangerous alliance, but he was willing to risk everything to maintain his power. With Calloway's backing, Jake started collaborating with local reporters eager for a sensational story. He fed them carefully constructed narratives. Lily was an outsider, clueless about the local community, imposing her will on the entire system. Jake didn't hesitate to imply that Lily was hunting officers to boost her image. Within days, articles began surfacing in minor news outlets, portraying Lily as an inexperienced leader disrupting the police station with personal ambitions. The reports didn't outright accuse her of wrongdoing but planted seeds of doubt.
Jake didn't realize he was merely a pawn in a larger game orchestrated by Calloway and his ilk. They didn't care about Jake's survival, he was a shield, a decoy to protect their greater interests. But Jake, blinded by arrogance, believed he was in control. Not one to give up easily, Jake escalated his efforts when he felt cornered by mounting evidence against him. He convinced Calloway to arrange a private meeting with a prominent judge, someone Calloway had helped climb the ranks. During the meeting, Jake made a bold offer. "Help me get out of this, and I'll make sure no investigation ever touches you." He even presented a carefully fabricated dossier suggesting that Lily had once suppressed crucial evidence in a past case. If the document were leaked, it could destroy her credibility in an instant. Calloway, sensing the situation's volatility, agreed to help but set one condition. "You handle this yourself. If you fail, I want no part in it." Jake agreed. Days later, the fabricated dossier was leaked to a major newspaper. The story exploded with a headline, "Police Chief Lily Moore accused of suppressing evidence, the truth behind a decades-old case." The news sent shockwaves through the station and the public. Supporters of Lily began to question her integrity, while her critics found new ammunition to attack her. Reporters swarmed the station, demanding a response from Lily. Meanwhile, Jake watched the chaos he had orchestrated from a distance, convinced he had delivered a decisive blow. She might be strong, Jake thought, a calculated smile spreading across his face. But no one can withstand pressure from both the system and the public. In the days following Jake's smear campaign, the atmosphere in the police station felt cloaked in a thick fog of suspicion and tension. Lily Moore, outwardly composed, was acutely aware that every move she made was being scrutinized. The articles targeting her spread quickly, planting seeds of doubt even among officers who had silently supported her. Yet, Lily remained steadfast. She understood this was not just a battle against Jake Turner but against a much larger network hiding behind him. Lily immediately recognized the orchestrated smear as part of Jake's plan. With the help of Chris and Thomas, she swiftly initiated an internal investigation to verify the authenticity of the dossier. Meanwhile, she addressed the media with a direct statement. "The truth doesn't need to be hidden. I'm ready to cooperate with any investigation to prove that this dossier is a fabrication." The investigation quickly revealed irregularities in the documents. Signatures had been expertly forged, and the data didn't match the original records. Lily even uncovered evidence that one of Jake's loyal officers had secretly accessed old files to create the fake evidence. With support from forensic experts, Lily presented the investigation's findings to the public, proving the dossier was nothing more than a carefully staged attempt to discredit her. "Jake Turner thinks he can manipulate justice," Lily declared in a press conference. "But justice is not so easily bent. The truth will always prevail, no matter how deeply it's buried." Late one evening, as Lily worked in her office, a soft knock interrupted her focus. She looked up to see Chris Meyer standing hesitantly at the door, his expression anxious. "Come in, Chris," Lily said, her tone reassuring. Chris stepped inside, clutching a thick file. "Chief, I think you need to see this," he said, his voice trembling. Frowning, Lily took the file from Chris. As she opened it, her eyes scanned pages filled with financial records, redacted internal memos, and printed email chains. The documents painted a clear picture: Jake was not acting alone. He was backed by a powerful group of individuals who had used their influence to cover up his misconduct for years. "Chris, where did you get this?" Lily asked, her gaze sharp. Chris swallowed hard, lowering his voice. "I found it in the archives. They think I'm just a rookie who doesn't know anything, but I overheard some conversations and got curious. I copied everything before they could clean it up. Do you realize the danger you've put yourself in?" Lily asked, her tone serious. "I do," Chris replied, his eyes filled with determination. "But if you don't act on this, no one else will." Lily studied Chris for a long moment, sensing the internal struggle he had endured. This was the moment she had been waiting for, a glimmer of hope in the darkness of betrayal and corruption. Lily spent the entire night analyzing the documents Chris had provided. A horrifying picture emerged.
Jake was the linchpin of a network involving officers and high-ranking officials, including members of the city administration. The emails revealed a coordinated effort to cover up everything, from wrongful arrests to bribes taken from criminal enterprises. The documents also exposed the role of Mark Calloway, whom Jake had met earlier.
Calloway was not just a powerful official but one of the main sponsors of these corrupt activities.
He used his network to shield Jake, treating him as a tool to execute shady operations without leaving a trace. Lily felt a surge of anger but also knew the fight now extended far beyond Jake Turner.
She was confronting a system built on silence and complicity.
The next day, Chris noticed he was being watched. He caught unfamiliar glances from his colleagues and received unexpected questions from officers who had never shown interest in him before. Jake had begun to suspect something. One evening, as Chris left the station, he spotted a strange car parked at the corner, its headlights glaring, engine idling. His heart pounded, but he maintained his composure and quickened his pace toward his car. As he unlocked the door, a voice called out from the shadows.
"Meyer, be careful. You don't know who you're messing with."
Chris spun around but saw no one. The car roared off, leaving him standing in the dark, cold sweat dripping down his temple.
Lily knew she couldn't keep the findings secret for long.
She called a meeting with her trusted team, including Deputy Chief Thomas Wright and a few other reliable officers. Presenting the documents Chris had uncovered, she emphasized the gravity of the situation.
"This is no longer about one individual," Lily said firmly. "We're up against a system. But if we act strategically, we can dismantle it." Thomas nodded, his expression a mix of concern and determination. "Do you have a plan?"
"We need to go public," Lily replied.
"But not yet. First, I want more evidence.
We have to ensure that when we strike, there's no room for anyone to cover it up."
The next morning, as Lily Moore walked into the police station, the atmosphere was different. Every eye turned to her.
Not with the usual respect or deference, but with a mix of curiosity and skepticism.
Whispered conversations seemed to echo down the hallways. Lily didn't need to ask. She knew something was happening.
Thomas Wright hurried toward her with a grave expression. "Chief, you need to see this," he said, holding out a phone. On the screen was a freshly published article. The bold headline read, ** New leader faces troubled past, who is Lily Moore?"
**.
The article accused Lily of using personal connections to advance her career, insinuating that she had benefited from favoritism by her former mentor, Raymond Harris, who was now under investigation for corruption. The claims were carefully crafted, not entirely false but not wholly accurate either, designed to mislead readers. Worse still, the article highlighted a past case Lily had handled years ago, pointing out her failure when key evidence went missing under her watch. Lily gripped the phone tightly, her eyes fixed on the screen. Though she was accustomed to the pressures of her job, this personal attack made it difficult to maintain her composure. She knew the article wasn't a coincidence. It was another move in Jake's plan. "We can issue an immediate rebuttal," Thomas said, his voice laced with concern.
"I'll contact legal."
"No," Lily replied firmly.
"If we react now, it'll only amplify the story. I want to know who's behind this." Thomas nodded, though his worry was evident. "Lily, you know this won't stop here, don't you?"
That evening, when Lily returned home, she sensed something was off. The living room window was slightly ajar, even though she distinctly remembered locking it before leaving.
A feeling of unease crept over her.
Lily stepped inside, instinctively resting her hand on the gun at her hip. On the kitchen table lay an old family photo, a picture of Lily as a child with her grandmother Evelyn, a cherished keepsake from her childhood. What sent a chill down her spine was the handwritten note on the back, *, "Don't forget what you've left behind." Lily looked around her home cautiously but found no one. It was a clear threat, a deliberate message targeting her deepest vulnerabilities. Taking a deep breath, she steadied herself, her mind buzzing with questions.
Who had done this? How much did they know?
The next morning, Lily called an emergency meeting with her trusted team. She laid the article on the table, her sharp gaze sweeping across the room. Someone in this station has been talking to the press, she said, her voice low but commanding.
And if I find out who it is, there will be serious consequences.
No one responded, but the tension in the room was palpable. A few officers avoided Lily's gaze. Chris Meyer, sitting in a corner, felt the weight of the moment but knew he couldn't speak up just yet.
After the meeting, Thomas entered Lily's office holding a report.
"We've traced the source of the article," he said. "It came from an anonymous tip within the station.
And I'm afraid it's Jeff." Lily closed her eyes briefly, fighting back a wave of disappointment.
Jeff, a senior officer she had believed she could trust, had betrayed her. Not only had he leaked information, but he had also inflated and distorted the truth to damage her.
"Why?" Lily asked, her voice quiet but razor-sharp.
"Jake," Thomas replied. "I think Jake promised him something, maybe a promotion or simply protection." In the days that followed, Lily faced a growing wave of criticism from both the media and some officers in the station. Whispered conversations grew louder, and skeptical glances became more obvious. The most painful part, however, was the isolation. While she still had allies like Chris and Thomas, Lily knew this battle wasn't just about reforming the system, it was about defending her reputation and regaining trust. Late one night, alone in her office, Lily stared out the window. The city lights sparkled, but she felt like she was standing in darkness. She recalled her grandmother Evelyn's words, "Justice isn't something you wait for, Lily. You have to fight for it, even if you have to fight alone." Taking a deep breath, her gaze hardened with determination. She knew she couldn't let Jake and those backing him win. But first, she needed to rebuild trust among her peers and confront the accusations head-on.
The following morning, Lily's composure was put to the test again. Another article emerged, accusing her of mishandling funds during her tenure as a detective. Though completely baseless, the story was spreading fast, amplified by Jake's supporters and certain news outlets eager for controversy. Meanwhile, Jake continued to manipulate the narrative. He held informal gatherings with officers, positioning himself as a protector of their interests.
"Lily Moore doesn't care about us," he declared. "She's here to destroy what we've built." Chris Meyer watched these developments unfold with growing frustration.
He knew Jake's accusations were false, but fear kept him silent.
Each time he saw Lily walking through the station, surrounded by whispers and skeptical glances, guilt gnawed at him.
One evening, as Chris sat at his desk, he decided he couldn't remain a bystander any longer.
Gathering his courage, he approached Lily's office and knocked softly. "Come in," Lily said, her voice calm but tired.
Chris entered, clutching a USB drive.
"Chief, I think this might help," he said, placing it on her desk.
"What's this?" Lily asked, picking up the drive. "It's a recording," Chris explained.
"From a meeting Jake held with some of his loyalists.
I managed to capture part of it on my phone.
He talks about his plans to bring you down, about fabricating evidence and spreading lies."
Lily studied Chris carefully, sensing his unease. "Why are you doing this now?"
"Because I've seen enough," Chris admitted. "I can't stand by while he destroys everything you're trying to fix."
"I know I should have spoken up sooner. I'm sorry."
Lily nodded, her expression softening.
"Thank you, Chris.
This takes courage. I'll make sure it's used wisely." Over the next few days, Lily and her trusted team worked tirelessly to analyze the recording and connect it to the broader evidence of corruption they had gathered. The pieces were falling into place, revealing not just Jake's culpability but the intricate web of individuals who had enabled him. Lily decided it was time to act. She organized a press conference, knowing the risks but determined to take control of the narrative. Standing before a sea of cameras, Lily presented the recording Chris had provided, along with the other evidence her team had uncovered.
"These aren't just accusations," Lily stated firmly.
"This is the truth. The truth about a network of corruption that has plagued this station for years." As she played the recording, the room fell silent.
Jake's voice filled the space, boasting about his plans to discredit Lily and protect his own interests. The evidence was damning, leaving little room for doubt.
In the aftermath of the conference, the tide began to shift.
Public opinion, once divided, started leaning in Lily's favor.
Community leaders voiced their support, and even some officers who had been skeptical of her began to reconsider.
But Jake wasn't ready to give up.
From his office, he plotted his next move, determined to regain control.
"This isn't over," he muttered, his eyes blazing with defiance. Jake's defiance fueled a last-ditch effort to salvage his control. He reached out to his allies, including Mark Calloway, who had grown increasingly wary of the growing scrutiny surrounding the network they had built. Jake insisted they needed to take decisive action to neutralize Lily.
But Calloway, sensing the walls closing in, began distancing himself.
"You're on your own now," he told Jake curtly.
"If you can't handle this, don't expect me to clean up the mess."
Left with no safety net, Jake became more desperate.
He sought out officers he thought were still loyal, trying to rally them for one final attempt to discredit Lily.
However, cracks in his influence were beginning to show. Some officers, emboldened by Lily's resolve and the growing evidence against Jake, refused to participate.
Meanwhile, Lily continued to strengthen her position. She met with trusted journalists who value truth over sensationalism, providing them with clear, verifiable facts about the corruption in the station. The stories that followed painted a stark picture of systemic abuse, implicating not only Jake but also higher-ranking officials. As the evidence piled up, the public's perception of Lily shifted dramatically. Protests demanding her resignation dwindled, replaced by calls for accountability from those who had enabled the corruption. The breakthrough came when a whistleblower, emboldened by Lily's actions, came forward with critical information. This individual, a longtime insider in the city administration, provided records directly linking Mark Calloway to the network. The evidence was irrefutable.
Lily knew this was her chance to deliver a decisive blow. She organized a formal inquiry, ensuring that every piece of evidence was documented and presented transparently. The inquiry not only exposed Jake's misconduct but also unraveled the larger network, revealing the full extent of corruption that had been festering for years. One morning, as Jake arrived at the station, he was met by officers from an external investigative unit. They presented a warrant for his arrest. "Jake Turner, you are under arrest for bribery, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and abuse of power," the lead officer declared. Jake froze, his usual smug demeanor crumbling as he was handcuffed in front of his colleagues. For a moment, the station was silent, the weight of the moment sinking in. As Jake was escorted out, his eyes locked with Lily's. "You think you've won," he hissed. "But this system is bigger than you. It'll chew you up and spit you out." Lily met his glare with unwavering resolve. "This system only survives because of people like you. That ends now." The news of Jake's arrest spread quickly, sending shockwaves through the community and the broader law enforcement network. The fallout was swift and far-reaching. High-ranking officials like Mark Calloway were implicated and faced their own legal battles. Within the station, a palpable sense of relief began to replace the tension that had lingered for so long. Officers who had once feared speaking out started to find their voices, inspired by Lily's determination. Chris Meyer, who had played a pivotal role in exposing Jake, approached Lily one evening. "I never thought I'd see the day," he said. "Thank you for not giving up, even when most of us did." "This isn't about me," Lily replied. "It's about all of us. Changing the system takes more than one person, it takes everyone willing to stand up and do what's right." Over the next few months, the station underwent significant reforms. Lily implemented policies to ensure transparency and accountability, including a robust complaint process and an independent oversight committee. Ethical training became mandatory, and officers were encouraged to speak up without fear of retaliation. At a community meeting, a woman stood up and addressed Lily directly. "We've been let down so many times before," she said. "But you've shown us that things can change. Thank you for giving us hope again." Lily nodded, her expression a mix of gratitude and determination. "This is just the beginning. We still have a long way to go, but together, we can make it right." Despite the progress, Lily knew the fight wasn't over. The dismantling of Jake's network was a victory, but the scars left by years of corruption would take time to heal.
She remained vigilant, aware that challenges would continue to arise. Late one night, as she sat in her office reflecting on the journey so far, a sense of quiet resolve filled her.
Justice, she realized, wasn't a destination.
It was a continuous effort, requiring courage, integrity, and the willingness to stand up for what's right even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Looking out at the city lights, Lily thought of her grandmother's words, "Justice isn't something you wait for. You fight for it." She was ready to keep fighting. Months after Jake Turner's arrest and the subsequent upheaval, the atmosphere in the station had shifted dramatically. The fear and hostility that once dominated were giving way to cautious optimism. Officers began to collaborate more openly, trusting that their voices would be heard without fear of reprisal. Lily Moore continued to lead with a steady hand, focusing on both reform and rebuilding the station's reputation within the community. She introduced programs designed to engage the public, such as town hall meetings and community policing initiatives, aimed at fostering trust and transparency.
One afternoon, during a community outreach event, an elderly man approached Lily.
He extended his hand, his expression serious but warm. "I've lived here my whole life," he said. "And for the first time in a long while, I feel like someone actually cares about this community."
"Thank you for that."
Lily shook his hand, humbled by his words. "It's not just me," she replied.
"It's a collective effort. We're all in this together." Meanwhile, the legal fallout from Jake's network continued to unfold.
Mark Calloway and several other high-ranking officials faced indictments, and a comprehensive review of past cases revealed numerous instances of misconduct. Lily worked closely with external investigators to ensure justice was served, both for the victims of corruption and for the community as a whole. Chris Meyer, who had been instrumental in helping expose the corruption, found a renewed sense of purpose. He began mentoring younger officers, sharing his experiences and encouraging them to uphold the values of integrity and accountability.
One evening, Chris approached Lily in her office.
"Chief, I just wanted to say, I've learned so much from you," he said.
"Not just about being a better officer, but about being a better person."
Lily smiled.
"Thank you, Chris.
But remember, change doesn't stop here. You've shown courage, and that makes all the difference.
Keep setting that example." Despite the progress, challenges persisted. Some officers resisted the reforms, clinging to old habits and questioning the necessity of the changes.
Lily faced criticism from certain factions within the broader law enforcement community, who viewed her efforts as overly ambitious or disruptive.
However, Lily's unwavering commitment to transparency and fairness gradually won over many of her skeptics.
Her leadership style, defined by both firmness and empathy, became a model for others to emulate. As the station continued to evolve, Lily found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. She thought about the countless obstacles she had faced, the betrayals, and the moments of doubt. Yet, through it all, she remained steadfast in her belief that meaningful change was possible. One day, during a routine meeting, Jeff, the officer who had initially betrayed Lily, stood up to speak. His voice was steady but tinged with emotion. "I want to apologize," Jeff began, addressing the room.
"I made mistakes.
I let fear guide my actions, and I betrayed the trust of this team and Chief Moore.
But I've learned from that.
I see now what leadership truly looks like, and I want to do my part to make amends."
Lily nodded, acknowledging his words.
"Apologies are a start, Jeff. But real change comes from actions. Show us through your work that you're committed to doing things the right way." Jeff's journey of redemption resonated with others in the station, serving as a powerful reminder that accountability and growth were possible for everyone. As the months turned into a year, the station transformed into a symbol of resilience and reform. The community, once skeptical and disillusioned, began to see the station as a partner in building a safer, fairer environment. At the station's annual holiday gathering, Lily addressed her team. The room was filled with familiar faces, some old and some new, but all united by a shared purpose. "We've come a long way," Lily said, her voice strong yet warm.
"But the work isn't done.
Justice is a journey, not a destination. Every day, We have the opportunity to make a difference, to earn the trust of the people we serve, and to uphold the values that brought us here in the first place." Her words were met with applause, a testament to the respect and admiration she had earned. As the gathering continued, Lily found a moment to step outside, seeking a quiet reprieve from the celebrations. She gazed up at the night sky, the cool air refreshing against her skin. Her thoughts turned to her grandmother Evelyn, whose unwavering belief in justice had inspired her to pursue this path. "This is for you, Grandma," Lily whispered softly. In that moment, Lily felt a deep sense of peace. She knew the road ahead would still be fraught with challenges, but she also knew she wasn't alone. She had her team, her community, and an unshakable belief in the power of perseverance and integrity. The fight for justice was far from over, but Lily Moore was ready to face whatever came next. The following months brought more victories, but also new trials. The reforms Lily had implemented began to take root, yielding tangible results. The station's complaints system now operated with transparency, citizen satisfaction improved, and officers who once viewed Lily with skepticism started embracing the changes. However, some factions outside the station continued to resist. A group of influential figures within the city, those who had thrived under the old system of corruption, began lobbying against Lily's reforms. They argued that her policies were disrupting the efficiency of law enforcement, fueling a subtle but persistent smear campaign. One such effort involved a public hearing where Lily was summoned to defend her changes. The room was packed with city officials, community members, and journalists. Mark Calloway, who was awaiting trial but still wielded influence through his connections, had orchestrated the hearing, hoping to paint Lily as overreaching and divisive. As the hearing commenced, one council member voiced the concerns of the opposition. "Chief Moore, while we commend your intentions, many argue that your reforms have created tension within the police department and strained resources. How do you respond to these criticisms?" Lily, calm and composed, stood to address the room. "Tension and strain are inevitable when change is introduced. But I ask you to consider this: are these reforms disrupting the system, or are they disrupting the comfort of those who benefited from its flaws?" Her words rippled through the room, drawing murmurs of agreement from community members. "I understand that change is difficult," Lily continued. "But maintaining the status quo would mean perpetuating injustice. My team and I are committed to ensuring that this department serves the people with integrity, transparency, and fairness. That is non-negotiable." Her response was met with applause from a section of the audience, though Calloway and his allies exchanged frustrated glances. Following the hearing, Lily's unwavering stance inspired a surge of public support. Community leaders who had previously been silent began voicing their approval of her efforts, amplifying the momentum of her reforms. Meanwhile, Chris Meyer and a group of younger officers took it upon themselves to strengthen community ties further. They organized outreach programs in neighborhoods that had historically mistrusted law enforcement, fostering dialogue and building relationships. One afternoon, during one such event, a young boy approached Chris hesitantly. "Are you really here to help us?" the boy asked, his wide eyes filled with both hope and skepticism. Chris knelt to meet the boy's gaze. "Yes, we are," he said earnestly. "And if there's ever a time when you feel like we're not, you tell me. Deal?" The boy nodded, a small smile breaking through his apprehension. Moments like this reminded Chris and the rest of the team why the fight for reform was worth every challenge. However, the battle against entrenched corruption was far from over. Mark Calloway, desperate to regain his footing, orchestrated one final attempt to undermine Lily. He leaked misleading reports that suggested her reforms were creating inefficiencies in the department, stoking fears among city officials. The reports gained traction in certain circles, and once again, Lily found herself at the center of controversy. But this time, she wasn't alone. Officers like Chris, Thomas Wright, and even Jeff stepped forward to publicly defend her, sharing their first-hand experiences of the positive changes her leadership had brought. In one interview, Chris said, "Chief Moore's leadership has transformed our department. We're not just better officers because of her, we're better people. Her reforms aren't about politics, they're about doing what's right." Jeff, once a symbol of betrayal, also spoke out. "I made mistakes in the past, but Chief Moore gave me a chance to make things right. Her fairness and commitment to justice have shown me what real leadership looks like. The unified support from her team, combined with evidence of the reform's success, helped dismantle the latest smear campaign. Calloway's influence waned further, and he was soon convicted on multiple charges. With the corruption network exposed and dismantled, the station began to stabilize. Lily's leadership became a model for other departments, and her success inspired a wave of similar reforms in nearby precincts. One day, Lily received an invitation to speak at a national law enforcement conference. Standing before a room filled with officers and leaders from across the country, she shared the lessons she had learned through her journey.
Change doesn't come easy, Lily said. It requires persistence, courage, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths.
But if we commit to integrity and accountability, we can rebuild trust not just within our departments, but with the communities we serve. Her speech earned a standing ovation, solidifying her reputation as a trailblazer in law enforcement reform.
Back at the station, life had settled into a new rhythm.
Officers worked with renewed purpose, and the community's trust continued to grow. One evening, as Lily prepared to leave the station, she found a small envelope on her desk.
Inside was a handwritten note. "Thank you for believing in us when we didn't believe in ourselves. You've given us a reason to be proud of what we do again. Your team." Lily smiled, tucking the note into her pocket. She stepped outside, the city lights shimmering in the distance. The road ahead would always have challenges, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a profound sense of hope. Justice, she knew, was not a destination, it was a journey. And this journey, though far from over, had shown her that real change was not only possible but worth fighting for. As Lily settled into her role as the reformed leader of a transformed station, her influence began to ripple beyond its walls. The story of her efforts and triumphs inspired other communities to demand accountability and transparency within their police forces. Lily received numerous invitations to share her approach, but her focus remained firmly on her station and its people. One particularly busy morning, Lily found herself reviewing reports from the new oversight committee she had established. The data revealed promising trends, reduced complaints of misconduct, improved response times, and growing positive feedback from the community. Yet, she knew there was still room for improvement. Deputy Chief Thomas Wright entered her office, his expression one of calm determination. "Chief, there's something you need to see," he said, handing her a tablet. On the screen was a video recorded by a group of activists who had once been among her harshest critics. The video highlighted the changes at her station, lauding the increased accountability and the officers' engagement with the community. Lily watched silently, moved by the recognition of the work her team had accomplished. "It's good to see the community recognizing the effort," she said. "But we can't become complacent. There's still a lot to do." Thomas nodded, his respect for her unwavering resolve evident. "Understood, Chief. We'll keep pushing forward." The renewed sense of purpose within the station was evident in the way officers approached their work. Chris Meyer, now a confident and respected officer, had become a key figure in mentoring new recruits. His transformation from a timid bystander to a vocal advocate for integrity was emblematic of the cultural shift Lily had fostered. One day, during a routine patrol, Chris encountered a young man he recognized from a previous incident. A teenager who had once been on the verge of getting involved in gang activity. "Hey," Chris called out, approaching the teen. "How are you doing?" The boy hesitated, then shrugged. "Better, I guess." "You were right. I needed to get out of that mess." Chris smiled. "Proud of you for making the change. If you ever need help, you know where to find me." Moments like this reaffirmed the importance of the work they were doing, not just enforcing the law but actively supporting the community in its growth and recovery. While the station thrived, challenges continued to arise. New recruits brought their own biases and expectations, and it was up to Lily and her team to ensure that the culture of accountability and fairness persisted. Lily introduced additional measures, including ongoing workshops on ethics and implicit bias, ensuring that every officer understood the values of the department. She also made a point of being accessible, frequently visiting various shifts to hear directly from her officers.
Her leadership style, a blend of firmness and approachability, resonated deeply with the team. One evening, as Lily prepared to leave the station, she noticed Jeff waiting by her office door. "Chief," he said, his voice steady but hesitant.
"Do you have a minute?"
"Of course," Lily replied, gesturing for him to enter.
Jeff took a deep breath before speaking. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about actions speaking louder than words.
I want you to know I'm committed to proving myself, not just to you but to everyone here." Lily studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I've seen the effort you've been putting in, Jeff. Keep it up. Redemption isn't about erasing the past, it's about building a better future." Her words seemed to lift a weight from Jeff's shoulders.
"Thank you," he said earnestly. "I won't let you down."
As the months turned into another year, the station's transformation became a model for others to follow.
Community relationships continued to strengthen, and the officers' morale reached new heights.
One day, Lily received an unexpected visitor, a young woman from a neighboring city who had been inspired by Lily's story. "I've just joined the academy," the woman said, her eyes shining with determination. "Your work showed me that being an officer isn't just about enforcing the law.
It's about making a difference."
Lily smiled, feeling both humbled and proud. "It's a tough road, but it's worth it," she said. "Stay true to your values, and you'll do great things." As the visitor left, Lily reflected on how far she and her team had come. The challenges they had faced, the victories they had won, and the lessons they had learned had all contributed to building something greater than themselves. Late that night, as she looked out over the city, Lily allowed herself a rare moment of quiet satisfaction. She thought again of her grandmother Evelyn's wisdom: justice isn't something you wait for. You fight for it. Lily knew there would always be new battles to fight, new obstacles to overcome. But she was ready. Because justice was a journey, and she was determined to see it through step by step, for as long as it took. As Lily stood at the window of her office, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, she couldn't help but reflect on the long journey that had brought her here. From the painful lessons learned through betrayal and corruption to the triumph of reform, every challenge had shaped her into the leader she had become. But as she stood there, a sense of anticipation filled the air. The work was far from finished. Lily was fully aware that reform didn't end with one success or one victory, it was an ongoing effort. The changes at the police station were just the beginning. She knew the work of rebuilding trust and accountability would require consistent attention, not only from her but from everyone she had inspired. As the year drew to a close, Lily received a call from a national organization that promoted justice reform. They had been following her efforts closely and invited her to speak at a summit on police reform. The opportunity was both a recognition of her achievements and a challenge to continue pushing forward. Lily saw it as an important moment not just for her own story, but for the message that could reach the broader law enforcement community. At the summit, Lily was introduced to an audience of law enforcement officials, activists, journalists, and reform advocates. She was nervous, but the moment she stepped onto the stage, she felt the weight of the responsibility she carried. She wasn't just representing herself, she was speaking for every officer who believed in doing the right thing, for every citizen who longed for a fairer system. "I stand here not just as a police chief, but as someone who has seen firsthand the transformation that's possible when we commit to honesty, integrity, and reform," Lily began. "The road to change is long and often painful, but the rewards are worth every step." Lily spoke about the struggles, the setbacks, and the difficult choices that had shaped her journey. She shared the story of her grandmother Evelyn and the lessons of justice that had been instilled in her at a young age. She explained how those values had guided her through some of the toughest moments in her career and how they had ultimately led to the transformation of her station. The room was quiet as Lily spoke, captivated by the sincerity and strength of her words. By the time she finished, the crowd was on its feet, applauding her dedication and the courage it had taken to make the changes she had. As she stepped off the stage, Lily felt a deep sense of accomplishment. But she also knew that the true measure of success would be in the long-term effects of the reforms she had implemented. Change, after all, was a continuous process, not a single event. When Lily returned to her station, the familiar hum of activity welcomed her. Officers were diligently working through the reports, engaging with the community, and attending the workshops that had been introduced to ensure that the principles of justice and integrity were not just words on paper, but lived experiences. One day, Lily received a message from Chris Meyer. He had been promoted to sergeant, and he requested a meeting. As they sat down in her office, Chris had a look of both pride and humility. "Chief," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "I wanted to thank you for everything. I never thought I'd be sitting here as a sergeant, but because of what you did, I've learned what it means to be a true leader." Lily smiled warmly, proud of the officer Chris had become. "You did the hard work, Chris. You earned it." As Chris left her office, Lily sat back in her chair, reflecting on the journey once again. She had changed the culture of the station, built bridges within the community, and helped to shift the broader conversation about justice reform. Yet, she knew the most important work still lay ahead. There would always be more to do. More people to reach. More work to ensure that justice was not just something written in laws, but something embodied in the actions of each officer and every member of the community. The phone rang, pulling her from her thoughts. It was the mayor's office. "We've been following your progress here at the station," the mayor's assistant said. "The city council is convening next week, and they'd like to discuss some of your initiatives as models for other departments. They're also considering expanding the scope of your program to other regions." Lily's heart swelled with pride. The seeds of change she had planted were starting to spread. "Thank you," Lily replied, her voice calm but full of conviction. "I'd be happy to discuss it." As she hung up the phone, Lily turned to look out the window again. The city's skyline shimmered under the setting sun, the same view she had gazed at so many times before. But now, it felt different. It felt like the city was finally beginning to change, one step, one day at a time. Justice, after all, wasn't just a fight against corruption. It was about creating a future where everyone, regardless of their past, could have the opportunity to live with dignity, fairness, and respect. And as Lily Moore looked toward that future, she knew she would continue the fight. Not just for herself or her station, but for every person who deserved the promise of true justice. Because her journey wasn't over, it had only just begun. Months passed, and with each new day, the fruits of Lily's labor became more evident. The community continued to rally behind her, and the police department thrived under her leadership. The challenges that once seemed insurmountable now appeared as stepping stones toward an enduring transformation. Yet, even as progress flourished, Lily knew that she could never afford to rest on her laurels. The road to reform was long and winding, and there was still much work to do. Lily had made a commitment to her team, to the people she served, and to herself that she would never allow the system to return to the status quo. She had seen the cost of complacency, the toll it took on both law enforcement officers and the communities they served. Her role, she realized, wasn't just to oversee the changes but to be an active participant in the ongoing struggle for justice. One afternoon, a letter arrived for Lily. It was from a group of community activists, the same group that had once been critical of her. They were now asking to meet with her to discuss how they could further support the reforms in place. It was a pivotal moment for Lily. This was the opportunity to solidify the bond between law enforcement and the people they protected. Lily agreed to meet with them. She knew that true reform wasn't just about changing policies, it was about changing hearts and minds. The meeting took place at a local community center, and it was clear from the moment she walked in that the atmosphere had shifted. The room was filled with people who had once been wary of the police, now open to collaboration. They were eager to hear her ideas on how they could continue to make meaningful progress together. Lily began by acknowledging the pain that had come from the past, expressing her gratitude for their willingness to engage in a conversation. "I know the road to trust hasn't been easy," she began. "But we are here today because we all want the same thing, a city where everyone feels safe, respected, and heard. We've made strides, but the journey isn't over. We need each other to keep moving forward." The dialogue that followed was nothing short of inspiring. The activists shared their concerns, not only about law enforcement but about systemic issues affecting the community at large. They spoke passionately about the need for better education, healthcare, and job opportunities, areas where they believed real progress could be made alongside police reform. Lily listened intently, taking notes, and as the conversation came to a close, she felt a deep sense of connection. The group wasn't asking for a perfect system, they were asking for an honest one that recognized the humanity in everyone, from officers to community members. "I'm committed to working with you all," Lily said, her voice resolute. "And together, we'll ensure that our city is a place where justice, equality, and opportunity are not just ideals but realities for everyone."
The meeting was a turning point.
The group, once skeptical, expressed their willingness to work alongside Lily and her team. The breakthrough had been made, not through force or mandates, but through understanding and mutual respect. Back at the station, Lily shared the news with her officers.
"This is what we've been working toward," she said. "Not just reform, but true partnership. We are part of this community, and they are part of us. Together, we can make sure that every person in this city is treated with dignity, that justice isn't something only promised but something delivered." The officers, many of whom had once been uncertain about the nature of Lily's vision, now understood. The work was no longer just about keeping the peace, it was about building a foundation for lasting change. Meanwhile, Lily's efforts to expand the reform efforts continued to garner attention.
In the coming months, other cities began to take note of what was happening in Lily's department. She was invited to speak at conferences and forums, sharing her approach to police reform and community building. What had started as a singular effort had blossomed into a movement, one that transcended borders and set a new standard for policing in the modern age. But the journey was never easy. As Lily became a national voice for reform, she also faced new challenges. The media, once supportive of her efforts, now began to scrutinize every move she made, searching for flaws or signs of failure. Political opponents who had once stayed quiet began to raise their voices, questioning the effectiveness of her methods and whether the city had really improved as much as claimed.
Lily remained resolute, understanding that resistance would always accompany progress.
For every person who questioned her, there were countless others who supported the direction she had taken. In moments of doubt, she turned to her team, to the citizens whose lives had been impacted by the changes, and to her own core values. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of meetings, Lily sat alone in her office, reflecting on all that had transpired. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Chris.
"You all right, Chief?"
Chris asked, concern in his eyes. Lily smiled, grateful for his support.
"I'm good, Chris. Just taking a moment to breathe." "I can imagine.
But I just wanted to say thanks," Chris continued. "For sticking with us.
For showing us what real leadership looks like." Lily stood up, walking over to the window and looking out at the city.
"It's been a team effort," she said.
"I couldn't have done this without all of you. This isn't just my victory, it's ours." As Chris left her office, Lily felt a deep sense of satisfaction.
She knew the future wouldn't be without its struggles. There would be setbacks, moments of doubt, and opposition. But for the first time in a long while, she felt that the wheels of change were moving in the right direction. The work wasn't over, but the foundation had been laid. Justice, as she had learned through the hardest of lessons, wasn't just a goal, it was a living, breathing entity, shaped by every action, every word, and every choice made by those who truly believed in its power. And for Lily Moore, the fight for justice would continue, for herself, for her team, and for the people who had placed their trust in her. Because she knew, above all else, that the journey toward justice was never truly finished. It was a path that could always be walked, one step at a time, toward a better future for all.
Lily's journey was far from over.
As her station gained recognition for its reforms, Lily became an even more prominent figure in the movement for justice. Her success had inspired other departments to adopt similar policies, and her phone constantly rang with requests for advice and support. Still, she knew that the battle for lasting change wasn't simply about creating new policies, it was about changing hearts and minds, about shifting the culture of law enforcement at its core. One afternoon, as Lily prepared for a meeting with a group of city council members who were considering additional funding for community policing programs, she received an unexpected visit from Deputy Chief Thomas Wright. His normally calm demeanor was tinged with concern. "Chief, we have a situation," he said, sitting down across from her. "There's been a string of violent incidents in one of the neighborhoods we've been working on with the community. Some people are starting to voice their frustrations, saying we're not doing enough to protect them." Lily listened intently, her eyes narrowing. While she had worked tirelessly to build relationships with the community, she knew the path to true justice would always be fragile. Tensions could erupt at any moment. "I'm aware of the challenges," Lily said, "but we've made significant strides. What we're doing in that neighborhood is working. But we need to be transparent about the issues we face. Let's meet with the community and hear their concerns directly." Later that evening, Lily and her team visited the neighborhood, walking through the streets where the incidents had occurred. It wasn't a planned meeting, but the group of concerned citizens quickly gathered as they saw Lily arrive. An elderly woman stepped forward, her face etched with worry. "Chief, we don't feel safe here anymore. We need more patrols. More visibility. We need to know you're here for us, not just when it's convenient." Lily nodded, listening closely. "I hear you," she said. "I want you to know that we're committed to working alongside you, not just when things are calm, but when things get tough. We'll increase patrols, but we'll also continue to engage with you in ways that go beyond just responding to crime. We'll be here every day, building the trust that's needed to make this neighborhood safe, together." The community members looked at each other, some skeptical, others hopeful. As Lily continued to listen and engage, the tension in the air began to lift. This wasn't just about law enforcement showing up, it was about showing up with understanding, with the intent to rebuild what had been broken. The following weeks were marked by increased outreach efforts. Lily's department partnered with local organizations to provide youth programs, mental health resources, and educational workshops. These efforts were aimed at breaking down the barriers that had long existed between the police and the community. But just as things seemed to be improving, another challenge arose. A major news outlet published a story about an officer involved in an altercation during a routine arrest. While the details were still unclear, the story quickly gained traction, reigniting old fears about police brutality. The accusations, though unsubstantiated at the time, were enough to reignite doubt in the community. Lily knew that responding with silence or defensiveness would only escalate the situation. She called an emergency meeting with her team. "We're not going to let this derail everything we've worked for," she said, her voice steady but resolute. "We'll launch an internal investigation immediately and be fully transparent about the process. But we won't stand for the cycle of silence and cover-ups. Our duty is to the truth, to justice. And that's what we're going to uphold." Lily took the lead in addressing the media, a press conference where she emphasized the department's commitment to accountability. She made it clear that the investigation would be independent and that any officer found in violation of protocol would be held responsible. She didn't shy away from the tough questions but answered each with honesty and a determination to show that her department would not let past mistakes dictate the future. The investigation, though tense, cleared the officer of any wrongdoing, but the damage had been done. Public trust, fragile as it was, took another hit. It would take time to rebuild what had been shaken. Throughout it all, Lily held fast to her belief that reform was not about erasing the past, it was about confronting it head-on. She doubled down on her commitment to ongoing training, to being transparent, and to fostering relationships with the very people her department served. As the city moved forward, Lily's leadership began to inspire new movements, both within the department and beyond. Officers who once viewed reform with skepticism now became its champions, helping to spread the message that justice was more than just a goal, it was a way of life. But Lily knew the journey wasn't about her success or recognition, it was about making a real, lasting impact on the community. She began to focus more on mentoring the next generation of officers, showing them that being a good cop wasn't just about enforcing the law but about being a steward of trust, compassion, and integrity. One evening, as Lily prepared to leave the station, Chris approached her once more, his expression serious.